Welcome to my series, Shit That Happened When I Was a 911 Dispatcher, and tonight I'm going to tell you about the worst night that I ever worked in dispatch. Before I get to the story, I just want to clear one thing up. One of the most common comments in my 911 series videos is, who is that person snoring next to you and they need a CPAP machine, and I absolutely agree. And also people saying that it's rude of me to be making these videos because someone's sleeping next to me and I could be waking them up, but let me show you the culprit. Snore very loudly, and I don't wake her up because she's deaf. Okay, the worst night I ever worked as a 911 dispatcher. It was a clear black night, a clear white moon. Props if you know what song that's from. It was a 4th of July. This would have been 2005. And this was actually the beginning of the end of the first time that I worked for this department, because I worked there, quit, thought the grass was greener, it wasn't, went back, worked there again, got fired. This night was the beginning of me being like, I gotta get out of here. It was 4th of July. And the city that I dispatched for was in the county seat. I don't know. It's where all of the government buildings were. And with that being said, it also was where the government subsidized housing was. With that being said, backstory, I've lived in government subsidized housing before. My little brother actually refers to it as our bug house, but government subsidized housing has its place and is necessary. But statistically speaking, the crime rate is usually higher in those areas. So there was this one apartment complex that was historically problematic. They only had one automatic gate that let you in and out, and it was on the end of a dead-end road. And oftentimes they would call in fake 911 calls, get the officers inside that apartment complex, and then people would take the gate off the track so the officers couldn't get out, and so more help couldn't get in, and they would oftentimes start a physical altercation. So this was 4th of July, and of course shit was popping off because it was 4th of July. It's like one of the worst nights to work in dispatch. Well, and holidays, because families get together and drink and fight. So it got so bad, they pulled the gate off the track. There was assault on the officers. We had our canines out. There was like borderline riots in the streets. You couldn't even get through the streets. It was so bad. And they were popping fireworks at our canine. They were intentionally breaking bottles and throwing the glass into the street, and the canine's pads were getting cut up. So after like multiple attempts to lure officers into that area and like the canines getting injured, the police chief actually made the decision that we were not going to respond east of this main street, which was one street parallel to the street that the government subsidized apartments that we had so many problems with were on. So I had never seen this happen before, and I'd never heard of this happen before. He got on the public intercom system, like the emergency warning system, and he also put it out over like the radio and the local news stations that we were no longer responding east of highway boop, and that if you needed help, you needed to come to that highway, and that we would meet you there for assistance. We're getting so many 911 calls, which is par for the course on a holiday, but specifically like isolated to that area, and trying to decipher what was real and what wasn't, which it's not our job to decipher. We had to put in a call for service for all of it, but it was just so incredibly stressful, and having no available units. And then the call that put me over the edge was when a mother called 911 and said that her son had been stabbed multiple times, and I had to tell her that we were not going to be able to respond to her, that we needed her to get to this road, and she did. She loaded him into the car. From what I understand, someone else was driving, if I remember this correctly, and she had him in the front seat laid back, and she was straddled on top of him, and she was putting compression on his multiple stab wounds in his chest. And as they were just flying through the crowd, they were hitting people because people were blocking the streets. It was awful. I had already started getting really bad migraines like shortly before that happened. They had actually prescribed me, I don't know, it's probably come a long way. I don't have to take medicine for it anymore. It resolved when I quit dispatching, but I used to have an injection that I would give myself in my thigh when I would feel a migraine coming on because they were just debilitating. But this night, I actually stepped out away from my console, stepped outside, broke down and started crying, and my eyesight started fading in and out like a tunnel vision and going blurry. And it probably was like very temporary, but in that moment I felt like it was forever, that I thought I was going to lose my vision because I couldn't see. And maybe this was like the first sign that I was going to end up being a social worker. But just hearing that mother's call, like hearing her truly need help for her son, and because of other people's actions we weren't able to provide that immediate assistance, and she was put in a position to where she had to bring her son to us instead of us going to them, because that's what we're supposed to do as first responders. But at the end of the day, you have to put your first responders' safety first, because if they're not there to help one person, they're not there to help anyone, right? So if their safety is in danger, like, I get the chief's decision and I agreed with it, but having to be the one on that call and to tell that mother that she had to bring her son to us, and then seeing the damage that occurred because they were hitting people trying to get there, wild. One thing that really stuck out to me is there was this one officer. I ended up being able to go back and watch the dashboard cam because this was so long ago that body cam footage wasn't a thing, but I did get to see the dashboard cam from another unit that pulled up right in front of the car where the victim was. And this one officer got out, and actually he's one of like the bad 1 to 7 bad apples that I joke about. He wasn't a good officer. He did a lot of unethical things, and I saw some of them firsthand when I was out on rideouts. But he didn't even take the time to put gloves on. He just immediately went into action and took over for that mom and relieved that mom, and he started putting pressure and like rendering first aid. And I thought that was really powerful. Like, this is a person who you could have associated with being like guilty by association for trying to harm your officers and make fake calls to get your fellow officers into an area where they were in danger, because he was from that same apartment complex. But to see him just jump into action like that and not treat him any differently spoke volumes to me. Don't get me wrong, I still watched him do a lot of shady shit, but in that moment he did the right thing.